Tri-State Alliance were losing steam and soldiers by the day, and Arnesia was fast approaching victory. Arl's army had lost 121 soldiers, and 142 were seriously wounded. Nearly 200 more had minor injuries, compared to the other feudal lords, where the casualties amounted to half of the entire force. Vahilia's troops had a staggering performance. At the base of the general command of the Three-State Alliance, there was uneasiness. The man reported that in the south, the fighting was more or less even. And only in the north, their people could not even break through the defenses. "We can't keep wasting soldiers. We need to remove the troops from the northern front line for a while. Of course it's wildly infuriating, but now everyone has to make this big decision. He is confident that His Highness will understand their choice. For this choice is necessary to eradicate the evil called Arnesia. Now is the time to let in their power." Errol rested, and thought that it had been quiet lately. It was only a short time ago that they were draining to get the fortress back. Since their army was completely focused on the Crow, the other feudal lords' shock troops began to severely strain the enemy. Thanks to both sides shedding blood fiercely right now, he couldn't significantly reduce his losses. Errol thought the weather today was not at all to die for. The Tri-State Alliance invaded for their own gain, hoping to take over Arnesia. However, the defending kingdom as well, though each with their own goals, are laboring in sweat for feats. After the situation has changed for the better, previously passive feudal lords already confidently commanded in their own to kill as many opponents as possible, and Crown Prince Zale went into battle to show a worthy image of the future king. Errol realized that it was greed that had caused the war to break out. Greed helps a person to rise higher for his selfish ends. He is ready to do anything. A greedy man does not care whether money, power, or corpses are laid at his feet. He just keeps striving for the top. If you think about it, you can already call this hero greedy. However, do they know that the sky will not change so that it will not lie beneath their feet? No matter how high up a person gets, they will eventually die themselves. The guy's musings were interrupted by a girl asking him what he was thinking about. Errol noted, immersed in thought, and let his expression trail off. It was Asha that said she wasn't asking him to stop lying around anywhere. But still, she asked to keep her image, pointing soldiers, because they already see everything. The prince smiled, said that when you forget about image, life is immediately easier. And if she didn't believe it, they could test it together. The girl refused, for she has a full tambourine job. By the way, the enemy has not attacked at all lately. The hero asked if it seemed to her, too, that the attacks had completely stopped for the 6th day of silence. Asha stated, wishing that was the end of the war. But the hero realized that it probably wouldn't be that way. The next thing he did was quietly utter the question of what they were up to. When the knight looked at him in surprise, he began to whistle, thus summoning Fry's griffin here. When the lord climbed on top of him, Asha shouted that it was dangerous. But the prince informed her not to worry, and he would be back soon. After which, along with his pet, he flew away. Ace was only left to look around the village with regret. Errol began to look around, parting the sky. After only a couple minutes, he noticed something that caught his attention. It became abundantly clear that he was right. So he turned to Asa and asked her to call Sena. There's news of further developments. It looks like the war won't end quickly. When the hero returned, he immediately began the meetings. He asked those present what course they thought the Union was going to take. Sena didn't hesitate to say that they would attack head-on again. Asha asked the Lord to refrain from doing anything like the recent ones. He agreed with her, but remarked to the second girl how the enemies would attack if they retreated. She said she just didn't think the Alliance would suddenly decide to capitulate. Then Errol stated, thoughts are probably... Surrender was out of the question in the current situation. But one wonders why. Asha decided to assume it was all about pride. The prince praised her and asked her to take a pie from the shelf. He went on to say that the Three-State Alliance had started a war on an official level, challenging them. Therefore, he would not retreat, even if the situation did not deteriorate much. Everyone would agree that it would be strange if these types, after first attacking them, suddenly came and said they were apologizing, and a mistake had been made. In addition, their peoples would be very angry about it. So that's the reason the war continues. But the question arises as to what the Alliance will do then. It was a rhetorical question, after which Errol announced the mobilization. Their enemies would begin to mobilize en masse. Sena asked, surprised, isn't that dangerous? The principal replied that it was naturally dangerous. But the Alliance, especially the Merman Empire, has an extremely high slave population. Therefore, hundreds of new enemies would soon be coming to them. This is a rather unexpected move, because Arnesia has barely repelled the main forces. Suddenly, new enemies appear, and in huge numbers. The enemy will now seek victory in quantity rather than quality. But the Empire of Arnesia, of course, isn't exactly a one-man show. Even with a multi-million-dollar army on the horizon, the key is to stay calm. The prince said that he had prepared something for such occasions. Only he, Aiken, and his father knew about it. Seinu wondered what it was. Then the lord threw off his cloak and showed a large crossbow for ultra-long-range shooting. It was now already pointed toward the front line. This crossbow is capable of firing up to 100 arrows per minute. What's more, the arrows themselves are unusual, designed directly in their forge. Errol is certain that no other royal scientist can make anything like it. Even Asha reported that it was true he was impressive. The protagonist made a crossbow, taking the perfect modern technique as an example. He didn't want to use it so soon, but there was no other way out. If the enemy is attacking their good, it is necessary to respond in kind. Near the first line of defense of the Ernesian Empire was a commander with his subordinates. He reported that the cancer had gone silent for some reason. It had been quite some time since the fortress had been retaken. It was unclear how long they were still going to defend. Still, Ernesia would win. Now is the time to attack. If they successfully complete the mission, His Highness will recognize their exploits. So the man ordered his subordinates to go on the assault. Didn't think about the fact that he'd take all the credit here, but just then they looked out over the ravine below. Then the man was startled, for there he saw an enemy army of many thousands. It must be the new Alliance army. The knight immediately asked if they would attack, and the commander shouted that he was crazy, and they were just dark. Therefore, they retreat immediately, and it is necessary to send a messenger to the fortress. As a result, the Alliance mobilized all possible forces and carried out another raid on Orenzia. The Crown Prince said that we must resist at all costs. The border fortress must not be allowed to fall to the enemy again. He figured they probably wanted to, without any strategy, and offset it with a defense in numbers. But allowing that, naturally, was not going to happen. The enemy commander once again ordered the mages to begin attacking Ernesia's advanced troops, but they reported that the spell wasn't working, and it seemed to be a block. The interlocutor was horrified, not realizing how many of those damn mana stones they had, though this turn was expected. Next, she sent the mages back and the soldiers to attack. They will fight not for life but for death, and then they will succeed. The captain thought about the fact that the lost slaves could be replenished at any moment. The most important thing now was victory. Suddenly, he saw that despite the numerical advantage, the defending troops were not fleeing. If you think about it that way, logically in this situation, only retreating would save the troops. It's not clear what they're trying to accomplish. Just when he was thinking about it, an arrow flew near him and stuck into the ground. From his experience, the man realized that this arrow was simply huge, and it was unclear how it had gotten here. He had never seen anything like it, but what he saw a moment later startled him even more. It was a hail of the same huge arrows that were flying at his troops. The horrible picture filled his mind, and he wondered if it was possible. And those warriors who fled without protective ammunition were killed in moments. The commander sees what is happening, immediately confused and already wanted to leave, but he soon realized he couldn't do that now. The arrows would have to run out soon, and they would just have to endure the moment. After thinking about it, the stomping of hooves was soon heard. And it was the Crown Prince, along with his army, who rushed into battle. They made a maneuver, ending up behind the enemy's backs. The hero surveyed the battlefield from an elevation and saw arrows ahead and cavalry behind. He didn't even want to think about what kind of mats his enemies were covering him in there right now. Their arrows, by the way, do a great job. A downpour of them does not allow the enemy to take a step forward. Of course, simple shields won't help here. Obviously, we need something more serious, and the enemy has no such defense. Next, the prince turned to his warriors and asked how many arrows were left. They reported having a decent amount more and were just about to reload. Arel realized that no matter how cool a crossbow was, it had its disadvantages too. Because of the weird design, you have to spend a bunch of time reloading. It would be nice if that was the only problem, but it's not. There's also a problem with the arrows themselves. After all, each one was custom made at their blacksmith. In other words, they're wasting their money right now. At that moment, Mr. Errol was approached by Dia. He asked her what had happened, if the stones were running out. She informed me that I still had plenty of mana left and ran out of enemy mana. The prince said, in that case it was worth going on the attack. He asked how many stones they had. The sorceress said there was still 80% available. 20 would have to be left for defense. She could handle the block quite well on her own. Errol said she was out of her mind. Who wastes the power of a 6th class mage on just a block? Then he saw the cavalrymen just as they were falling back. Now it was their turn to burn the enemy to hell. Dia indicated that she would do as he said and began to use her force. Enemy troops were stunned at not understanding what the net in the air was, but it turned out to be a magic cage that held them back. The main tasks that the prince set for his wizards were 2 tasks: minimum losses and maximum damage. After the restraining magic, a fiery magic burst onto the battlefield. The enemies didn't realize what was happening. Who would have thought that the defense spell mana network could be used like this? But fire wasn't the only thing that would scare them. The battlefield literally had hearths of burned warriors. When the rest of the enemy troops saw this one, and they couldn't believe their eyes. So in a panic, they began to turn around and flee into the battlefield. Arel watched what was happening from the air. He realized they were scared, but it was right to let them get away. Next, he ordered him to tell his older brother and everyone else that they were going on the offensive against the Union army. After the Ernesian army began to report victories, it was clear that the fighting was taking an unexpected turn. Of course, there were those who did not like such things. The ruler of the Merman Empire asked with horror what it all meant. The government of the Kingdom of Demaniel and the Archduke of the Principality of Sejpen were in contact with him. Emperor Merman said, just as they said, he ordered a general mobilization, sent a huge number of warriors, but what was the result? The Archduke said he was afraid he had no excuse, and King Demaniel is with you mentally to blame right now. One has to think about what to do next. I wonder what the Archduke thinks lies ahead. The interlocutor said whether he wanted an honest answer. The king said that he did. Let him speak as he was. Then the Archduke reported. Unfortunately, the situation is close to defeat. Half of the combat forces have been lost, and the morale of the remaining ones has been severely damaged. Even if they manage to properly engage the soldiers, they cannot escape the Empire's innovative weapons. Emperor Melomaniac asked if he was referring to that small arms gun that sucker Errol invented. King Demaniel said, one master, even called its creator a true monster. How the hell it's designed is incomprehensible. They couldn't create anything like it. Ruler Merman was angry. They outnumbered the enemy after all. That's how they also started this war with a prearranged plan of action. Errol Ernesia is the culprit of all this. No one expected him to be so intrusive. The Archduke said if they want to change the situation, it is necessary to somehow buy time to find the enemy's weak point. Suddenly, the Lord was brought by his subordinates, saying that there was trouble. Emperor Merman said that he had told them not to come in, that something serious had happened. Then the wards were horrified to hear that the Ernesian army was advancing. Just outside the border fortress of the Kingdom of Demaniel was Kanya. She asked her brother, who was beside her, if she should just break the gate. He said it was true. Let it hit her from the heart. The sister realized her mission and prepared to do it, filling your new weapon with more mana. With just one sharp lunge, the girl easily broke through the rest of the gate. The defenders were horrified by this and determined to keep the enemies from getting in. We must stop them at all costs. They all came out in a mob against one girl. Seeing them, Kanya wasn't scared at all and noticed that they didn't move like turtles. Due to the slowness of these warriors, she was the first to rush to the attack and hit many of them with a single lunge. Then she said she could handle this shit alone. Errol smiled and said that after all, there was nothing like a master swordsman in this business. In the Merman Empire, the border fortress was also attacked. Actually, this has already happened, and yes, the borders of the Principality of Sejpen. The Emperor of Energy said because of the enemy's greed, they lost some of their people. Therefore, it is time to avenge the pain they have all suffered. The hero realized that his father seemed to be really pissed off. So the next target of their attack is the capital of the Tri-State Union. Arl's army managed to retake the borders and capture the fortress and the enemies. Sena soon said that she didn't even think they'd come here. Asya also confirmed that. Not so long ago, wars were only retreating. The Lord was willing to give a tooth that the three rulers of the three-state union were tearing the hair out of their heads. Then, Asya asked how Lady Kanya was doing. And she literally had wars falling on their knees in front of her, saying she was the Grand Princess. Not only did she become a swordmaster at such a young age, but she also shone in actual combat. So there was no begging to reveal her secret. The girl got a little embarrassed and said, for that matter, she just ate a lot and worked out. The hero informed his knights. She was reaping her laurels, so he didn't pull her, especially since she seemed to enjoy it. Asya then asked what their next plan was. Would they continue to assault the enemy? The prince noted that it was true that they would only slightly reduce the momentum. They'll crush us into an alliance, taking it from them bit by bit. He's the one who mocks the enemy, in at least 3 years, and they will have managed to capture about 20% of the enemy territories. And in about 5 years, the enemy will no longer be able to hold out. The interlocutor asked if she understood correctly that in other words, the marriage would break down in 5 years. Errol confirmed it, but to be exact, most would starve to death. After 3 years, the alliance will suffer enormous financial losses, and Ernesia will have complete control over trade. The economic crisis is much scarier than military pressure. Over time, even civil war can erupt in the alliance. Outside, he has an enemy waiting for him in the form of them, and inside his hedgehogs are disgruntled people. The girls remarked that it was just awful. The hero agreed he would hate to allow such a thing to happen. But it should not be forgotten that the enemy was going to do them no less dishonorable. If they dared to touch them, they should have thought of the opposite situation. And in this case, do not start a war if you are not prepared for the consequences. There is no need to sympathize with the enemy, as they say. He made the mess himself, and let him solve it himself. If the alliance keeps its guns up, it will face retribution it will never forget. That's exactly the quote from Father Errol's letter. And when he's angry, he's a really scary person. Sena noted the creepy thing about this war, and Asya confirmed it. That's when the prince told them not to worry. His hypothesis is real only if the alliance continues to resist. He's sure they'll want to avoid it if they have the brains. In the meantime, all we can do is wait for news. Ruler Merman was just as angry and said that if surrender, there was no way he was ready. The Empire had never faced such an embarrassment in its entire history. The subordinates have remarked to His Majesty that their situation is already worse than ever. And the best solution now was to take the soldiers away. The ruler interrupted him, asking him what this nonsense was. Was he not ashamed to say such a face? Even though she didn't like to say it, he asked her to believe it. They would be much more ashamed if they continued this war. Moreover, how do they look into the eyes of innocent people who are starving and dying at the hands of the enemy? It is clear to everyone that their alliance has already lost. So he asks for a cessation of further hostilities to put his subjects out of their misery. Next, he literally begged the ruler to agree with his decision. But the emperor reported that his answer would not change, and there would be no surrender. The subordinate asked with great surprise. But why would he want to do that? The gentleman said that he opposed his position thinking of the people, and he understands their feelings. Nevertheless, surrender was simply not possible. If they think it will make the situation better, it certainly won't. Because after that, Ernesia will no longer consider them human. The war was declared by none other than Emperor Merman. If the result is the same in the end, they have no other choice. The ward again asked His Majesty to think of his subjects. But the Emperor continued to say that the three-state alliance would not surrender to the last. In the end, the alliance decided not to capitulate, but to fight Ernesia to the very end as long as they could. The protagonist didn't expect there to be such idiots in the government. And so this is the answer they got in the end. If they did surrender, he would settle the issue of starvation for the civilians. It is not clear how they were going to win when even general mobilization did not help them. As they say, what you sow is what you reap. There is no point in standing around and watching it all. The last operation of the three-state alliance also failed. The endless spawns and powerful weapons wielded by the kingdom of Ernesia under the root cut off all enemy morale. The ruler of the Empire Measures novel soon came a letter. In it, he was asked to listen carefully. It is pointless to continue shedding blood, so they are calling for their immediate surrender. If they decide to surrender, they promise to kindly provide assistance in ending the war. Naturally, the emperor did not like such a thing. And just a few days after that, Emperor Theorel received a message. After reading it, he reported that it was a wise decision. In the end, the alliance did capitulate, and this glad tidings spread all along the front lines. Arel was very much relieved that the war had come to an end. Now we can finally go home. At that moment, he suddenly remembered the first time he'd ever been discharged from the army. And now he was saying goodbye to that shit again. He ran out to the wall of the fortress and berated the allied troops. His eyes would not see them and their army. Aja, for her part, asked Errol to stop doing that. A small portion of the other feudal lord's troops remained on the front lines. But the troops that included Arl and Kanya were ordered to withdraw, and they returned safely to the castle. The hero was damn glad to see even a blizzard. But we should still order the guys to clear the snow. It was time to return to my carefree idle life. The emperor at the meeting reported. The question of post-war proceedings with the alliance can be considered closed. All that remains is to reward the heroes who bravely defended the borders. The Margraves will be out for gold and permission to make prisoners of war their slaves. And as for Errol, we must think about it. Those present supported that the third prince had done well, and it was definitely worth rewarding him for his exploits. But suddenly one of the faithful addressed His Majesty. He asked if he planned to leave those weapons in the third prince's feud. It's not that he has any distrust for His Highness. He doesn't think that a mere feudal lord would be able to handle it. Some also cheered him on. Thirel didn't realize who the hell they took him for. Just some cocky people. That's why he said the weapon was the domain of the Empire. Errol himself said he wasn't going to leave it just in Fahilian territory. In fact, they're in the process of deciding how to reward him. The Emperor has thought about giving him the title of Duke. And I wonder what the others think about it. Someone said that such an award was appropriate. His Majesty, he added, in truth asked him what the boy himself wanted. But the answer really surprised him. Errol asked for the unremarkable fiefdoms near Fahilia to be given to him. Soon the protagonist received a letter, which reported interesting information. He was glad he was getting what he asked for. He didn't think he'd get a chance to grab all that land. He imagines them all sitting there laughing at him, but let them laugh all they want. Next, he turned to Dia and reported that it was kind of dry in here. So threw her out to adjust the temperature. And while the girl was doing that, Errol decided that now it was time to deal with what they had gotten. He found out that there was gold there too, although there was plenty of it already. The money could be used to cover military expenses and compensate the soldiers. Only slaves are left. Most likely some of them will be handed over to them. The Union was unable to buy back all the POWs, and those officially became slaves of Ernesia. And while everyone is puzzling over what to do with the work pile, Errol already knew what to do with them. There are plenty of empty lots in Fahilia that are habitable. And there was enough money for food. So it was decided that half of the new slaves would be given to Fahilia. Errol stated that the battle had been an exhausting one, but not without some nice bonuses. He can just see the pieces starting to fit together. Let the dumb aristocrats start to fear him. Ruler Demanuel was angry at Arnesia. These scoundrels are asking for compensation of 2 million gold pieces. And in such a short period of time, it's simply unrealistic to raise such a sum. They would have to suffer several years of poverty to pay off the debt, and then take just as long to recover. They had to give up in order to survive, and that's too bad. At that moment, the subordinates were saying that it was all their fault. Their carelessness had caused the whole debacle. The king only reported that there were no heads raised, and let him use them to make estimates. The punishment will be dealt with later, or the state will be even worse. There will be no pay until all the aristocrats who participated in the war have been compensated. The subordinates rose and declared that they would obey His Majesty, and the gentleman added, "The first thing to do is to decide what to do next." At this time, the situation was no better in the Principality of Sejpen. The Emperor seems to have sent them far away. He says he can't help them, and they'll have to deal with the consequences themselves. The interlocutor in the room asked what this nonsense was all about. The Archduke said, on the other hand, he didn't expect anything else. After all, they are only a dependent state. They should be glad it ended at least this way. The main problem now is the compensation. 800,000 gold and 40,000 more for the slaves. The subordinate could not believe that the universally respected Archduke had become a major debtor in an instant. Because of this, he blamed the energy. In the Merman Empire, the situation was even worse. People took to the streets claiming that first the Empire had sacrificed them by hanging the noodle about justice on their ears. Now they called the whole thing a misunderstanding and rushed into retreat. The Emperor is the only one to blame for this war, and he is exactly the murderer. A subordinate informed His Majesty that it was necessary to drive these vandals away. Let him only give the order. But the man said that such a course of events had been expected from the moment the letter of surrender was sent. It was all his responsibility, and his alone. After some time, the ruler of the empire, Merman, resigned for health reasons. As a result, the title passed to his eldest son. It took all 3 states of the Union a long time to get back on their feet again. At this time, Her Highness was informed that it was time to depart. I wonder if you can live a happy life if it's already painted for a person. Kanya had thought since she was a little girl, that the palace was too boring. She was constantly being chased by a maid, telling her that it was very dangerous to behave like that. That's how boring her everyday life was. The girls said she should know everything a princess needs to know. It was understandable that she might not like studying, but let her try to concentrate a little. It's not that she didn't like learning. She's just annoyed by the whole royal thing. Also, no one disputes that she is the Princess of Arnesia. But what does that have to do with living on a schedule? When the girl started fencing lessons, the maids realized that these lessons were the only thing she was trying at. The girl herself thought it would be cool if her life was as free as the swing of a sword, perhaps from the mouth of a princess. Those words may sound very arrogant. But from that moment on, a cherished wish was born in her. An interesting message came to Kanya in the present time. Arel asked if she understood correctly that she had received a letter ordering her to return to the palace. The sister reported that it was true. It was Mom and Dad who wrote to her. The prince reported, it seems she got a lot of publicity during the war. He realized that every aristocrat in the kingdom now knew that sister had become a swordmaster. But apparently, because fencing went against the image of the princess, the rumors were considered exaggerated. However, now that the war was over, everyone realized that this was definitely not the case. Influential cowards began to fear Kanya, saying that such a strong warrior should not sit in their ears. Errol said, a prince of men who would not respect a master swordsman. As far as the girl knows, all current masters are in the personal guard of the rulers. Her sister asked, wondering if he wanted her to leave too. The brother only asked to keep the conversation straight. It turns out that she followed him because she didn't want to infringe on the future he had planned for her. But surely she knows that it can't go on like this forever. He used to be able to teach her things, so she got stronger. But if she continues to stay with him, she'll only be frozen in place. In other words, she won't make any progress. So why don't she go back and take matters into her own hands? Let them set a goal to be recognized in some way. This will result in her gaining independence and becoming a true adult. The girl started posting about it. She went on to say that it didn't sound very convincing, especially from the mouth of someone who is looking for an excuse to loaf around every day. Errol shouted that this was different. Now, if she really wants to become an independent knight, let her prove that she has every right to do so. And we need to think about what he said. Okay. When the conversation was over, Kanya left the room. One day, the maids, looking at the portrait, told the mistress that she was very lucky. Marriage with such a handsome man is great. She's sure the girl will be happy. Kanya naturally didn't like that prospect. She thought some scarecrow would interfere under her feet. Since she's an adult princess, it's a marriage of convenience or something. And in doing so, it becomes clear that it is futile to complain. Also, the girl then heard that Errol was being banished to another feud. He was having a much harder time now, and she was going to support him. But suddenly, walking down the hallway, she heard shouts of joy. Even though the sound was muffled, The girl could clearly distinguish everything. It was nothing but an exclamation of joy. The princess realized, unlike her brother had accepted his fate. According to the data, remembered his words, when he grows up he won't work. He wants to live, as important, in some remote place. It occurred to me that he wasn't kidding then. I wondered if being banished to another feud was really his lucky ticket. His brother did not simply accept the fate given to him, but as if he was adjusting it to himself. After thinking about it, she decided that maybe she could do it too. Who knows, suddenly he might do as well as Arel if he follows him and learns from him. Thinking about it now, Kanya realized that for a moment she had forgotten why she had come here. But things clearly can't go on from here. She doesn't want to be a worthless big sister, who only has to rely on her little brother. Time passed, and the protagonist rejoiced at the beautiful weather. It is better not to waste such a day on trifles. Suddenly he saw someone come out his door. It was Kanya, who happily announced that she had decided to return to the palace. The hero was both happy about this and sad about the broken door. Just like that, Kanya went back to the royal palace to be recognized. Arel had, of course, thought of a backup plan B that would make the outcome the same as if Kanya had chosen to stay with him after all. But that didn't really matter now. Lastly, the girl stated, besides her there were 2 other swordmasters. Therefore, perhaps the first thing to do was to defeat them. Then the hero asked her to try harder. No more wrecking everything during training. He could no longer take on her expenses. The girl noted that she would be with her own to keep in mind. After saying goodbye, Arel hoped she would find her way. He was sorry to part with her, of course, but she wasn't traveling 3 lands away either, so he promises that he will support her from the outside. At last the prince could return to his study in peace. It was there that he decided it was time to mind his own business. The happy news was that Fahilia was quiet today. The young people of the village had married, which is good news. Perhaps Fry should find a date too. Next thing you know, the guy finds out that there's more money and the territories have expanded. So he thinks it's time to get down to business. He still doesn't care about power and politics. After all, as they say, whoever has the money rules the world. It is the most important weapon of civilized society. We need to think about future plans to expand our influence. Great, he will open a bank and implement currency reform. Nowadays, most nations use gold, silver to have, and all of them, understandably, have different rates. The currency reform will be of great use in such an unstable situation. If he doesn't, someone else will. So you shouldn't pull the cat by the pride. If you take over the financial market and add value with your own money, no more cockroaches will dare to declare war on them. But you'll have to find the labor force. We need to find a really good laborer. Ideally, the guy's goal is to dump everything on a handyman, while he does the same as always. It all really sounds like the perfect plan, but who to put in charge of this endeavor? Suddenly he saw that he had his mom on the phone. The woman was wondering how he was doing. The boy cheerfully said he was fine, but wondered what the sudden call was about. The woman reported that it was no big deal, he was 16. The protagonist immediately realized what she was getting at. And his mother really said that it was time for him to look for a bride. From this the son was truly amazed. Eventually received similar information, Aja congratulated the prince. Dia also congratulated him. And without congratulations to Sena, of course, we couldn't do without it. The hero thanked them, of course, but was not at all thrilled. Lefana told him to stop by the house for a viewing sometime. She, His Majesty, had even already made a list of candidates. Arel was upset, because he thought he hadn't even gotten married yet. What the hell was marriage? He even misses his sister already. Back then he didn't really understand how she felt, but now, how he understood. At that time, Asha asked who the potential brides were. The prince replied that it was not yet clear. But apparently they decided to take his opinion at least a little into account, letting him choose one of the 10 applicants. That's exactly why he didn't bring the girls here. He needs help choosing. Arel realized that it would be difficult to understand their true intentions because of what they had to choose from the documents. In such a situation, it is worth listening to the opinion of others. Suddenly the girls informed him that, to tell the truth about his similar questions, and not really understand. The prince didn't understand if all 3 of them were. Asya is an aristocrat in general, after all. The girl noted that their family had fallen apart even before the talk of marriage began, so it's as it is. Arel asked what about Sena. She replied that it was their custom to grab someone they liked and drag them home. Daya was next in line. She said that she had no experience, but she thought it was necessary to choose an educated girl from a good family, who is skilled in martial arts, in other words, perfect in every way. The hero reported that with her criteria, he would die alone. He further added that for other options there are no other options, so we'll work collectively. Soon the girls asked about the first candidate. Arel noted that she seemed kind of muddy to him, so no. About the next one, he reported that their age difference was too great. As a result, their discussion on the choice of candidates went on well into the night, and the prince had to go to the imperial palace after all. Lefana was delighted to know who her son liked. But she had no idea after what difficulties they had chosen the bride Arella. The boy realized that his mother looked like she was actually hoping for something, and he just chose a girl from a quiet family, to whom they will cause unnecessary trouble. Next, his mother informed him that His Majesty was very pleased with his seriousness about getting married. The hero was surprised, and realized that it meant he could not be told that he did not want to get married. Soon they came out of my mom's room to get acquainted. The first thing that greeted them was a man who immediately welcomed them. He also introduced himself, saying that he was Count Tevin Kovenst. Next to him was also his daughter Saria Kovenst. She is the second daughter of the Conquest family. Aurel knew that the Covenist County was a family of aristocrats living in the southwest of the empire. They aren't rich, are layered with deep traditions, and have a pretty good reputation. The boy greeted his chosen one by introducing himself and said he was glad to meet her. Next, the parents decided to leave the two alone. The hero found out that the girl seems to be very soft and gentle. She is a vivid example of a typical socialite lady. But there was a big spoonful of tar in it all. It's about Arelu not liking her. Because that's not his type at all. Her nature is pleasant enough, and she also has an education. Apparently the girl is very erudite, just an angel, not a bride. But that's exactly why it turns out that she and the prince are too different. She's like a white dandelion, and she's 100% not going to get along with a devil like Errol. After chatting for a while, they decided to call it a day. The hero sat next to his mother and wondered what he should do now. The girl he was dating seemed to like him a lot. His mom and his dad almost certainly too. If he refused, he would embarrass his mother. Leofana was just watching what her son was thinking. Suddenly dumbfounded, she asked him if he didn't like that girl. My son was surprised, asking if it was noticeable. It's not that he didn't like her, it's just that there are nuances. Mom told him not to worry about it. His opinion is important to them too. His Majesty himself said that they would only make things worse with their pressure. Errol realized that his father seemed to have given up on his sister. Obviously, he knew that a forced marriage would do no good. In the end, the prince apologized and said it wasn't his option. Finishing his meeting with his mom, he was glad he'd barely made it out. He would like to put the question of marriage on hold for the time being and enjoy his bachelor life in peace. There's so much he hasn't done yet. Coke hasn't even been invented yet. And the production of Coca-Cola is more important than any defect. While thinking about this character, saw something strange in the bushes. He didn't understand what it was. There are hardly rabbits in this garden. Suddenly something popped out at him from there and placed itself right on his face. It turned out to be a salamander, but it's unclear what a fire spirit is doing here. And if there is a spirit here, there is most likely a summoner himself. As far as the hero knows, there are no those in their kingdom who are good at summoning. Following the salamander and the art, a girl got out. She was at her chafing and asked if he would give her the lizard. The prince immediately realized who this girl was. Her name is Faina Amuret Janil, Princess of the Malman Empire. She ended up here as an exchange student, but essentially a political hostage. Errol hadn't expected to see her here. He had only heard of her from reports. Apparently she doesn't even know him. So he asked if it was the princess's lizard. The girl replied that it was so. Let her live as she wanted, Princess or Mrs. Fina. The boy retorted that this was a rather cavalier answer for a princess. Fina took the lizard and said she wasn't in her homeland. Besides, she's here to study and doesn't care about formalities. The hero liked the fact that she spoke so cavalierly and with that face. In turn, she thanked him for catching her friend and said goodbye. Errol was surprised and didn't even have time to ask yet. He shouted back to Her Highness, wondering if the spirit was an accident, which made the girl very wary. She asked fearfully, "What other spirit has no idea what it's about?" "It's just a pet." Errol remarked for her to confess, for she couldn't lie. To prove otherwise, Fana asked to see if it was an ordinary lizard, and her so-called pet spewed fire at that moment. The prince said that it is amazing. It turns out that lizards can breathe fire nowadays. A moment later, his mouth was covered by the girl's hand. She pounced on him and claimed she had no idea who he was. But let him just forget now what he'd just seen, and she wouldn't be in debt. Errol was no less surprised by that, and didn't understand what was wrong with her. It's literally the first time he's seen us so fearless, especially the one who's trying to bribe him. In the end, he agreed that he would keep quiet. If she didn't want to create unnecessary fuss, he understood. To be sure, Faina asked if he really wouldn't tell anyone, and the boy pointed out how he would actually benefit from it. Even if he blabbed, it would be easy enough for her to deny it. And actually, if she didn't want to get in anyone's face, why draft her? The interviewee said it doesn't work that way at all. She can't control it. Now everything was clear to the hero. If you think about it, the relationship between the spirit summoner can be considered a mutual consent, rather than a unilateral submission. The princess is not yet a true prez. Apparently, the salamander is running after her because of a personal favor. So now he said he would give one piece of advice especially for the girl. Let her try to show the spirit who's in charge and pretend like she's training a dog. So now the lizard, he asked for a paw. Fina was surprised since it wasn't a dog in any way. Showing who's in charge is very strange. But in the end she did ask for a paw, and the salamander surprisingly understood her, after which fulfilled what she had abandoned. The princess was greatly surprised by this, So she started training further, trying tumbling and different techniques. I even had time to master the call to myself. After that, the hero approached the girl and remarked that it was easy enough. Fina noticed that he had really helped her out well. But I wonder how on earth he knew all this. The boy noted that he had just read it in some book. The girl understood and thanked him, and next she even asked him what his name was. Arel stood up and noticed. More would ask later. He said his name was Errol Ernesia, and she had better remember that name. At first, the boy thought of saying, offhand, what kind of name it was, but something wasn't up to snuff right now. He wondered how she would react. After all, now she was in front of the one and for whom she had become a hostage. And Fina just noticed. So he must be from the royal family. Certainly not the reaction Errol had expected. He wondered if that was all she had thought and no other thoughts had come to her. He asked her if that was all she had thought and no more thoughts. The hero was just amazed that she didn't really know anything about him. Maybe she just doesn't care about politics or something. While he was thinking about it, Fina asked him if he knew much about spirits. The prince said that he did not know much. The interlocutor then asked if she could approach him with questions. Errol confirmed this. She said that she did not live in the palace. The girl was surprised to see that he had been exiled. The boy was angry at that. She was from the ruling family after all. She knows how things work. And in general, he is satisfied with his life. So he said, if that was how she wanted to meet, let her ask for the address from one of the concubines. And after that they said goodbye. At that moment he thought, even though he said so, they would probably never cross paths again. And she'd forget him 100% of the time. He even hoped you had. And that's what he thought at the time. A considerable amount of time has passed since the end of the war, but the traces of it have not yet been completely erased. The smell of the dead is still strong. Necromancers like this flavor a lot, like some kind of sweet. At the sites where there were many victims, they used their skills. And the name of it all is anger. It is the feeling of injustice as well as regret. Fear and confusion, the negative emotions a person feels when they die. A necromancer present at the scene of the battle stated, "Who would have thought such a tragedy would happen? How lucky he was." It's worth saying thanks to the moron who provoked the war. It's not long now, just a little longer, and that very day will come. The protagonist in turn rejoiced that his engagement had been postponed. And what it means is that he can safely take on the founding of the bank, as he wanted to do before. Together with his charges, he arrived at the required location. They were greeted by the owner of the estate. He also introduced himself, stating that his name was Hessel Karet, he was the head of the clan. He also greeted Lady Pernal and said that his youngest daughter had told him a lot about the girl. Asya was a little embarrassed, but also greeted him. Errol, for his part, had come to this estate on very important business. A girl named Heya, who drags around Asi's brother, is the youngest daughter of Marquis Hessil Karet. Those two are definitely worth each other. The Marquis, in turn, offered to go to the manor house. Soon, Errol sitting across from him said that he wouldn't beat around the bush and would tell it straight. He wants to start a business with him. The man looked a little surprised. Didn't say if he meant trading. For all he knew, the guy already had company. The prince noted that the scale of this business is much larger. He wants to open a bank in Ernesia, which will be under his patronage. To go into detail, he wants to launch a new currency. His Majesty, for his part, already knows about it. These are the coins that will be circulated. As Mr. Hessel knows, the current monetary system has too many flaws. Their coins are molded by dwarves, so they have an original composition that no one will be able to tamper with. They even reproached him here for wasting his talent on coins. The Marquis finally understood, but he asked why he wanted to do business with him. Errol said that the reason was simple. He couldn't pull the bank alone, so he decided to find a worthy companion for it. The guy wants to be the one to run the bank. The interlocutor asked about the steward, and the prince added that, to tell the truth, his shoulders could not bear so many worries, so he needs someone like a marquis. In fact, he knew he could hold out, of course he could. But he was wildly lazy to keep track of the money flow from all over the continent. He guaranteed his companion that he would make a huge profit from the business, which got him thinking. Arel realized what he was thinking, and that was that. In other words, the Marquis is not the kind of man who is obsessed with money. He has a resilient character and outstanding insight. A lot of people say he's great with investments. Hessil just said he has something that worries him. It's unclear how the prince can be sure, because everything will go according to plan. The guy asked not to worry. He would facilitate it. The man is probably afraid that the new currency might not take root in the kingdom. The interlocutor confirmed this. But Errol said not without difficulties, of course, but the plan is feasible. And for good reason. He asked who the interlocutor thought had the most gold in the empire right now. The prince has already discussed everything with major trading companies. His plan is not just to create a new currency, but also to strengthen the economic situation. Eventually he asked what the Marquis thought of it. As it seemed to him, he had dispelled all doubts. So wondering if his new companion was in, Hessel was sure that the boy's plan was doomed to success. but he had already made a great fortune for himself. I wonder what motivated him to get into this banking business. If he is driven by pure excitement, it is unfortunate that he cannot accept his offer. The prince indicated that he understood that perfectly well, and asked to be allowed to explain himself a little in such a case. His currency is just a way for him to control his cash flow, which, in turn, would later be used to build a megalopolis in Fahilia. He is going to make a real paradise out of land that the aristocrats consider worthless. The interlocutor asked what about the metropolitan area. Then Errol said the Marquis surely knows that building a city is not an easy thing. Even it is managed by the state. Therefore, careful preparation is needed. In a way, the bank can be considered one of the foundations for building a city. Hazel said, so the bank is like a foundation and that's what he dreams of. The hero asked if he understood now. The Marquis reported, if we were talking about a megalopolis in his lands, a mere feudal lord would have laughed at it. But he likes that he is driven by such a big dream, not empty desires. Thus, they soon struck hands. The new companion indicated that he was accepting Mr. Errol's offer. The boy told him it was a wise decision, and luck would surely smile on them. Before the prince left, the Marquis asked the lord how he would arrange the guards. He inquired if he needed to prepare information on this. Errol said he shouldn't do that. He'd figure it out on his own completely. And even then I understood perfectly well that first it was necessary to agree on Klesh with whom. After a time, he was in the southern territory of the Kingdom of Ernesia, near the mountain borders. This land is exactly where Sena's homeland is located. A small mercenary village called Nachafanil. Before being here, Sena had informed the lord that her village was tight on jobs for mercenaries because of its location. The boy wondered if that was why they had refused. The interlocutor immediately apologized because the gentleman had such high hopes for her. At that he only smiled and said he would have to go himself. That's how they ended up here already. Arel said not to give up after the first rejection. His main goal is to hire the villagers as bank guards. Since even Sena couldn't convince them, the only option left is to visit in person. On the way, Dia informed the gentleman to hide behind her, after which she used her power by applying spells. The spell turned out to be an attack spell, and she attacked the people that were hiding in the bushes. The strangers immediately fell to the ground, for they could not hold themselves in place. Arel then noted, judging by the girl's reaction, that she knew who they were. Sena said that it was true that they were people from her village. Apparently there was a misunderstanding. She apologizes and is going to have a conversation with them. Thus approached one of them and immediately kicked him very hard in the chest with her foot. Next, she grabbed him by his clothes and started screaming, speaking in an incomprehensible language. While they were arguing, the enchantress asked the prince what kind of language it was. The boy noted that the local mercenaries had migrated here from another continent, and apparently it was their native language. But it sounded too rude for a normal conversation, though the knight soon reported that it was now safe to move on. Thus, they arrived at the village. The headman, whose name was Avon Galil. He introduced himself and said that he apologized for not the most appropriate welcome. Sena noted that he was a good bowler. But the old man had noticed that he was a mooch. Arel joined their conversation. He asked if they were related, judging by their surnames. They answered with one voice that it was true. The girl is the granddaughter, and this is her grandfather. The headman was embarrassed in front of the prince for his uncultured granddaughter. But the hero said it was all right. Next, the old man asked to listen. He realizes that they have come a long way here. But unfortunately, they are unable to take orders at the moment. Have they come in order to put forward the same offer? He fears he is unable to help. His answer won't change, so let them enter from here. Then the hero realized that the old man was unshakable. Suddenly Dia reported, just as she thought, the place had changed a lot. Errol was surprised and wondered if anything was known. The enchantress narrated when she escaped from the magic tower lost, she did not name, recovered here. The villagers began to behave strangely compared to before, as if they were afraid of something. After listening to the ward's information, Errol asked the old man if they had any problems. If so, he would help them if he told them. Avon noted that they still can't get them involved, especially afraid that the prince won't be able to solve their problem. Guy said they'll just look into it, and let him tell it like it is. The interlocutor clearly didn't want to talk about it, but wondered if those present had heard of such creatures as the Walking Dead. They've been popping up around the border lately. The villagers of the village, of which the old man is the headman, have counted about 1,000 of these creatures. The protagonist just couldn't believe those words. The interlocutor marveled that he had not really known anything. Arel wondered if there was something obviously wrong here. The old man says he's seen 1,000 wandering dead. But then why was it so quiet then? Even at the king's meeting, the question had not been raised. That's why he asked who owned their land. The interlocutor said that the owner had recently changed. It is now a cousin of Count Kitil Rubit. The boy wondered why he was hiding the fact that dead people were appearing. This unheard it is because only this village has so far received damage. From this, the hero realized that he was getting weirder and weirder. A couple of years ago, Count Ketil Rubet was distraught that a reception was coming up, and their coffers were empty. they'd probably have to raise taxes again. The butler told the gentleman that the village had had a bad harvest year, so it was hard for the villagers to pay their taxes. But the nobleman remarked that he must be laughing at him. It's tantamount to an insult to him. It doesn't even mean he can't pay his taxes. Then we need to get rid of these useless rats. Upon hearing this information, the hero was surprised, asking if he had completely gone. The headman of the current village said his son and Seina's father prevented the tragedy. The son opposed the county's plans and was able to save the village, condemned to liquidation through a petition. But the past landowner took revenge on him for his crimes, and then he got even with him. The villain was incarnated for his sins 2 years ago, when it was discovered that he had illegally taken possession of the title. Errol said that's how his cousin got it, instead of a feudal lord. Now I wonder what general business he's doing. He also thought the similar current landowner was purposely hiding the appearance of dead people on his territories. Anyway, he was clear and said that then they would solve their problems, but he remarked that they shouldn't do that. He is planning to leave the village. The boy didn't understand why they thought that. Avon said it's not a problem for their time, because they've been nomadic for centuries. The landowner who sits idly by is undoubtedly bad, but the main reason they're gone is still because of the Walking Dead. They've been fighting back all this time, but they can't go on like this. Errol inquired about wanting to relocate to another state. If so, he could indeed understand them perfectly well. However, it is not so easy to get abroad nowadays. Even tribes that lead a nomadic lifestyle cannot just change their citizenship. The headman remarked that he was right, but they didn't have much choice either. The boy pointed out that their relocation could create another conflict. Then what if they just deal with the dead people? Avon questioned, but how he was going to do that. There's over 1,000 walking dead. All the more reason for him to try so hard for them. The prince said to stop worrying, he knows what he's doing. And as he said before, he expects their help in return. Let them just think of the greatest benefit to their tribe. There's no guarantee they'll find permanent shelter and food in another country. Here, he would help them eliminate the dead and pay them good money for their labor. And in such a case, doesn't the choice appear obvious? Hearing his suggestion, the headman asked if he could think about it for a while. The hero agreed to this and began to wait. To Sina, he said. Now it was clear why the men from her village had ambushed them. The girl noted that it was true. As far as she knew, a stranger had recently come here, who had become a walking dead man. Arel had also found out that the fighting skills of most of the locals were not inferior to those of real knights. But judging by their attitudes, they'd been through a lot. While watching the duel between the guys, he saw the blue light. It looked like this guy was the kind of guy who had an easy time awakening his aura. Leaving him and the others to fend for themselves is a real waste. He would have survived them at most if they'd fallen for his bait. Seina thought at that moment how kind their lord was. After much deliberation, the headman accepted Errol's offer. But on one condition, and that was that, if the problem with the dead men was not solved, the tribe would leave the village. However, the role realized, if he couldn't help, then he was a loser, not a pro. Soon those dead men were in for quite a beating, Seina reported. At this point, most of the dead are just in the woods hunkered down. Apparently, they were attracted to wild animals. The prince realized that they were lucky in that case, but he wondered where those things had come from. Judging by their behavior patterns, they weren't under magical control. Then maybe it was just some jerk who'd glued on a zombie for fun and gotten away. I wonder how it was that such a delusional idea had gotten into his head. Sina asked Mr. Errol what they would do with them. Do they just keep catching them? Mr. Errol said that wasn't very effective, so there was a better way. They need to pull them all into one place and cremate them all at once. Knight was amazed at the fact that it was possible, and Dia reported that he was unbelievable. The hero knew the most proven way to fight zombies was holy water. Except clearly, it's not cheap, and for some reason it is quite difficult to get it in their kingdom. They do have a 6th grade mage available though, so what else is needed? The prince decided to start with the most basic thing, how to get the dead in one pile. The answer proved too easy, and he and his family sat around the fire at night. The guy's plan was to prepare some appetizing bait for the zombified. In the meantime, he didn't expect whether the boy was pointing at the shooting stars. Seina didn't like their atmosphere, so she asked the master if they were sure they were doing everything right. He reported that he is responsible for his words, and they are doing exactly the right thing. The dead are driven by basic needs, and humanity is number 1 in their diet. In other words, they put everything on a silver platter for them. The girl did not understand why he was personally acting as a decoy. It was already dangerous. Errol said that his participation was necessary now. The girl could tell from her grandfather that he was skeptical for now, and the aristocrat's personal involvement might make him change his mind. He further indicated that he would like to ask her something. What she would do if her tribesmen did leave the empire. I wonder if she would have gone with them or not. The girl only smiled. Arel understood Seina was the kind of person who would never turn her back on her homeland. Most likely she would resign and return to her tribe. So now he said whatever decision she made, he wouldn't finish her off. However, that didn't change the fact that he was sorry to part with a talent like her. Sena was actually pleased to hear that. And while you weren't talking, the dead were already starting to gather and heading towards them. So the fact that their target was on its way became apparent. So the gentleman inquired if the knight was ready. She replied by extending her hand to him and telling him she was always ready. After that, Errol climbed on her back and they set off ahead. But the dead, who had sensed the victim, could no longer leave them and rushed after them. There appeared to be quite a large number of them in the forest, but Sena handled them easily. Errol, in turn, realized that these dead men were dangerous, not crawling like turtles, but pinched with all their legs. He even felt like the hero of a horror movie, so he informed the girl that they were going to play sledding. Sena was indignant, and said that this was no time for jokes. Some of the walking dead had already fled to them after all, and now it was just about time for Dia to come out. The girl announced that she would do it now, and began to use her force. Namely, she used a skill called Firewall, which was aimed directly at the dead. When all this happened, Aurel said it stank. I guess the mage didn't even bother to put mana protection on them. It hurts. They're all dead. They must have been made here as an experiment too, and if so, something's fishy. The fire also attracted the rest of the dead here. There's no end in sight. The prince asked for a repeat of the same thing and thought they might be done by morning. Morning came and Sena was already exhausted, claiming to be very tired. The hero says, apparently even a knight would find it hard to carry a man on his back all day long. He apologizes, but thanks him for a job well done. After thanking him, he turned his attention to the ashes. Dead men had only bones left, and it looked like they had already fried everyone. The hero asked if it was certain that there was no one else besides the dead. Dia reported that it was indeed so. Unfortunately, she found no traces of human mana. Errol felt an infused energy hovering over the deceased. Military uniforms and armor instead of burial clothes. It would be necessary to better study the vicinity of the borders where the war was fought. After thinking about it, he said that since it wasn't over, it was time to go back to the village. The residents, of course, greeted them in no better shape. The village elder said before negotiating, they should have washed themselves. The hero asked if they smelled so bad. Sena noted that it wasn't surprising, since they'd been running from corpses all night. A little time passed, and Aurel reported as Avon could see the issue of the dead mostly resolved. I mean, he said he'd keep his promise, so it's safe to talk about work. The old man was confused, for he had not expected that they would manage so quickly. The prince added that his family didn't tolerate gawkers. He could say at once that he would handle everything about their landowner, so they needn't worry. The headman didn't know how to thank him for that. The boy pointed out that what he wants is ingratitude, but an agreement to cooperate. He wants to hire capable young men as security guards for his new bank. Detailed terms and conditions of employment will be reflected in a written contract. The only thing he can guarantee at this point is that everyone will be satisfied. He, for his part, never singles out his own people. The interlocutor said since he said so, then there was no deal. And with that he pleased the guy. Aurel realized that the contract with the mercenary village was done. Even if the dead had to be dealt with over the bank. But anyway, there was only one last step left. There was an official meeting being held at the Ernesian Palace. Speaking, Errol said that his plan was to create a special imperial bank with a proper reputation. The contract, as many may have noticed, states that the bank is a special institution for keeping and lending money. One of the men remarked that he didn't understand something. Since when was a simple safe at home not enough to store cash? The hero noted, perhaps it is true, but how safe it is, don't they wonder? And whether they do not think that someone could get into this safe and steal all the money. He thought that was true. Not even mentioning that there had already been cases of infiltration with magic and brazen theft of all the stashed funds. It was a scary enough world they lived in, after all. The guy aims to create the safest vault that no one can get into. The plan is to equip the bank with reliable security guaranteed by his and his mercenaries' names, whose skills are as good as those of a knight. Of course, storage is not the only function of a bank, and an equally important part is the system of lending money. The man asked if he planned to lend money to anyone for nothing. Aurel said that's not exactly true. A will only lend to those who are able to pay them back. The bank would receive a regular share from the debtor based on the amount borrowed. At that point, he meant interest. The man asked another question, what happens if suddenly the person refuses to pay back the debt? Smiling evilly, the guy asked the question, and as he thought to himself, he realized he was only joking, and the old man was about to piss his pants. He went on to say, however, it would help them fix the empire's economy. After all, the most versatile bank in history would come to the rescue. Once it is created, Aurel intends to launch a new currency to replace gold. Those present asked to wait. Even just the bank already big changes, and what else than the issue of currency? They are not sure that there is any need for it. The hero realized what was expected. Went the objections. Therefore, he stated, as far as anyone knows, the present currency has an unstable rate as well as shape. due to the counterfeiting of coins and the mixing of their gold with that of other nations. The prince in turn would like to make up for these omissions. All the capital necessary for the distribution of the new currency will be provided by him personally. He guarantees the necessity of these changes in the name of the royal family. That was the end of his explanation of the plan, so asked those in attendance to share their opinions. They looked among themselves incredulously. Then some abstained, but the majority supported his idea. The protagonist realized that everything was perfect. It was a good thing he had bribed the favor of some of the people present before the meeting started. Now everything is ready, and we can start the transition to building the bank. One of the men mayor at the meeting turned to the other, asking if he would really leave things as they are. It would be possible to do at least something. Diesel Prats asked him what he was going to do about it. The prince is a duke, which means he has every right to conduct such business, the interlocutor remarked. But if nothing is done, it will be bad. The man asked what he meant if he was going to get in trouble, and it was Count Cain Roubaix who spoke to him. Diesel said, "Let him speak," thanking him for keeping quiet about the fact that he was covering up a whole 1,000 stray corpses. He no longer has the will to cover for him and his joints. Cain wanted to say something else to him, but there was no conversation to be had. In the end, everyone agreed, so in a month the bank was fully ready. And this despite the fact that it was located on the best land in the capital. Arl thought that in the future he should establish a branch in a city with a good trade or a high percentage of tourists. As for Fahilia, unfortunately, the bank would not open for a while yet. Suddenly he heard several people chatting. One of them was saying, it seemed, that it would now be possible to take out a loan at a good interest rate. They would no longer have to suffer the violence and the cosmic sums demanded by the moneylenders. Finally, at long last, this man would be able to fulfill his long-standing plan. This was the kind of sentiment Areola really liked. The aristocrats also discussed that an imperial bank had opened in the capital. But they didn't trust it, and the safe seemed more secure than any bank. At the same time, the gentleman who said this was asked if he remembered the robbers who had recently made attempts on their goods. The interlocutor stated that of course he remembered that they had caused so many problems. And so he told him the story of how the bank money was transported. The robbers ambushed a wagon carrying bank currency. Picking up at a certain spot, they rushed to the attack. But much to their dismay, he did not face a strong rebuff. The mercenaries carrying the money realized they were brigands, so they were not going to spare them for what they had done. Hearing such information, the aristocrat was surprised that the bank guards possessed aura. And it means that he doesn't smash all the brigands to pieces. The interlocutor said that it was true, and it also turned out that Count Rubit was behind the thieves. He received a serious punishment, as his list of crimes also includes hiding dead people. The nobleman finally understood. So he turned to his butler, asking if they still had the details of this very bank contract. This was the beginning of a new chapter in the financial flow of energy, which was just perfect for Errol. After a while, the emperor asked his son if there was any need for it. He only smiled and nodded affirmatively to him. Then Theorel reported that rebuilding Fahilia is a bit odd. Arel remarked that he believes Fahilia is a province worth developing. For this purpose, as much infrastructure as possible should be built. His father remarked that he understood his enthusiasm, but building an entire city is easier said than done. It is conceivable that he might even manage to do it. But what does he plan to do next to maintain it? The man understood that Fahilia was a very harsh land due to the distance from the center, as well as the cold climate there. Errol thought it probably bothers him that even after the city is rebuilt, Fahilia will remain a haven only for the locals. No one from the outside wants to move there. That's a problem that could very well endear this province to the people. The emperor said what a worthy ruler he was. It wasn't his son's job to develop such a backwater from scratch, though the boy didn't think of it that way at all. Theorel kept talking. Since it was such a conversation, he had something he wanted to tell him. He had actually planned to help him get out of this province in a couple or 3 years. He had planned to find him a more favorable environment. But unfortunately for him, that process had been delayed. This was the first time the hero had heard of it. He thought it was a rather reckless choice, as trying to sneak it in would cause resentment among the aristocrats. Was he really willing to go to such lengths for him? Suddenly, the boy informed his father that he was grateful for his kindness. That said, he has no intention of leaving his own lands. The emperor asked, but why? Arel didn't understand why he would go to a place full of annoying aristocrats. Especially when he finally saw the prospect of building his own paradise. No one interfered in his personal political games better than he did. He realizes, of course, that it would be only natural to want to go back. To his father, he informs him, if it were an ordinary province, no one would ever go into it. But he can certainly make this town shine and asks to trust him. After saying those words, the emperor immediately hesitated. Deeply exhaling, he informed, looking at his determined attitude, he can't refuse him. So he agrees, because he appreciates his determination and gives his consent. The son was very happy and thanked him for it. The rebuilding of Fahilia itself went fairly smoothly. The residents were notified in advance and gave their consent. The best construction laborers were also selected. Aiken said there are rumors among the masters that working under the prince automatically gives you access to amazing technology. It would be great if different, talented people would personally come and help. Workers Played said that first of all he wants to commission a residential neighborhood, in which the local population will be able to feel calm and comfortable. In addition, they have plenty of work to do, and in fact, he plans to plow everything here. He said, in that case, a solid fence would be needed first. Arrel agreed, for the neighborhood was indeed full of ferocious monsters. The locals will not be particularly surprised to see a 3-meter rabbit running around or a lord on a griffin flying over their heads. However, considering that visitors will be coming here in the future, such moments should be taken into account. So he said that safety comes first, and he has just the perfect stone for the fence. Those present became interested and the hero showed it off. Asked what they would say if it was strong enough. One of the workers reported, "It is definitely very strong and this specimen is unequaled. But it would take a lot of it to build a wall." Press said he needn't worry about that. The mines that had been given to him as a reward for his participation in the war had plenty of it. He'd heard that other lords had neglected the stone because they lacked the technology to mine it. But Fahilia is well within his grasp. The hero even thought that this amount of stone would be enough to build a whole castle, and there would still be some left over. So there was a question. Maybe ask them to make a statue of the great him. Suddenly, a man present at the meeting said he had a question. For what purpose Mr. Errol wants to rebuild this town? He doesn't think he was so concerned about the safety of the population. The boy pointed out that this is true. He just wants to make this city a tourist destination. After all, he knew that manufacturing and their specialty products is great, of course. But he doesn't want to spend his whole life on it and die without accumulating a fortune. And if he turns his land into a tourist destination, then he's sure to have fun. He informed those present that when the time comes, he will talk more about it. In the meantime, he simply suggested discussing the schedule. Time passed and he was tired, so he yawned. Because of their scale, checking everything takes a fair amount of time, but it's going well. He'll leave the rest of the work to the masters for now, and he's going to rest for now. So he took advantage of his new device, which he used to sneak into the other room. This is his private paradise where he can enjoy his vacation. And the name of this place is Arella's Cubbyhole number 3. Sure, he could have settled in the castle, but he has a craving for personal space too. It was fun to make a secret base, adding this and that. Plus, it's sturdy enough to use as a shelter in case of a siege. Now Arrel was going to rest at his leisure. He felt relaxed and thought that maybe next time they should build a base, somewhere in the hot springs. He didn't have much in the way of fun, though. There was too little entertainment, and that was the great disadvantage of the Middle Ages. The selection of books available is also small. They are either magic books or boring novels for nobles. How much I miss colorful comics, the boy thought. Now that the paper staging is okay, it's probably worth setting up a printing operation. The prince wanted to try his hand at something new. Eating and sleeping alone isn't enough for pleasure, so one needs something to keep their eyes pleasantly occupied. After he decided everything, he decided to go and do it. But suddenly a call came to him. It was reported that they had a serious problem. Alarmed, the boy asked what was the matter. He was told that there was an urgent message from the palace. Previously, the necromancer had enjoyed making this place wonderful resentment materials. He had finally managed to accumulate enough grudges after all. However, he didn't understand how those people dared to look down on them and call them black mages, simply because their thirst for knowledge was somewhat different. Using dark power, he asked the victims to wake up to the greed of the stupid people in power. When it was just under the ground, the walking dead began to appear. And there were, in turn, just a huge number of them. The necromancer couldn't contain his joyful emotions, so he laughed, talking about how now even the dark sect would be forced to recognize him. He sent the summoned dead forward, to show the foolish kings who dared defy them their true power. Obedient to their master's orders, the dead men moved out. There was a guard on one of the watchtowers. He reflected that things had been pretty quiet the last few days, but after looking at it, the binoculars became a stupor. After all, he saw countless undead, and didn't understand why there were so many of them. It was urgent to report it to the command, and he did so. Arel has received a report that large numbers of undead are appearing on the northeastern as well as southern borders. The number of undead is estimated at several 100,000. They're going to cross the borders of Arenzia and the Tri-State Alliance, and that's very bad. Soon Asha was surprised to hear the information that all the victims of this war and turned into an unclean. Arel reported that this was indeed true. If we take into account the testimony of the soldiers in charge of scouting, the number of dead soldiers corresponds to the number undead, so that it is true. Dia noted that she felt that what happened in Saina's home village should be seen as a training exercise. It looks like black magicians are involved. They are horrible people with bad taste. The girl was asked but was not too quick to make accusations. Though, for what it's worth, they say the undead, divided, have already crossed the borders of Ernesia as well as the Tri-State Alliance. There's a lot of them. and it's just creepy. Sena asked if Errol thought it was time to sound the alarm and rally the troops. The boy said he wasn't sure, since there had been no word from the palace. They probably hadn't decided what to do about it yet. He thought he'd relaxed too soon. He should have taken a closer look. He just hadn't found any significant evidence, so he was saying goodbye. And there were a lot of these things. In despair, the prince realized that because of the undead, trade would sag, and so would the construction of the city, and that's too bad. In any case, he asked me to tell the Knights of the Guard to be vigilant. After all, the undead could enter the estate as well. Don't worry too much, though, because the guy already has a couple ideas about it. He understood perfectly well that if there were problems, it was better to think of them as opportunities. So it was worth taking advantage of the opportunity and trying to make a profit. Meanwhile, in the border fortress of Ernesia, it was not at all peaceful. Countless rebellious dead were trying to climb the walls. The guard noticed that the nasty things were coming in non-stop, and he was asked how things were going. In response, he reported thanks to the successful organized defense, there were no major losses. To top it all off, as ordered, they focused on fighting the undead attacking the wall. When the commander first heard the warning about not wanting to head to the capital, he thought it was some kind of joke. But thanks to this denunciation, they are all alive. So he ordered to continue the defense until further instructions came from the castle. The emperor's castle was also in turmoil. Theorel ordered to give another order, to organize the evacuation of the inhabitants living near the border. In the worst-case scenario, she would have to leave the castle as well, but it didn't matter. He also realized well that Arel had offered to prepare in advance. Otherwise, they would have lost a lot more people. Suddenly a man addressed His Majesty. He said defense is good, but it won't solve the problem, and drastic measures must be taken. The emperor said, as they themselves know this is unprecedented in the history of the empire, or they have some ideas about it. The interlocutor asked how about seeking help from the Holy Kingdom. The Holy Kingdom is called Gelion. It is the most skilled country in the world at fighting the undead and other dark forces such as necromancy and curses. Theorel said their methods were impressive, but do they really think those people are going to help them so easily? Following its doctrine for many years, the Holy Kingdom officially answered all kinds of creatures except humans. However, in the Empire of Ernesia, people of all different races can gain citizenship, as long as they have certain abilities. Because of these disagreements, relations between the countries are strained, although this has not yet had any effect on politics. The emperor said, it is unknown what they will ask for the help they have given. They may try to make one or more policy changes. A representative of the elven race was also present at the meeting. He said that it was certain that he would not be able to try to deport or discriminate against representatives of other intelligent races. His Majesty added, that was why seeking help from this kingdom was the last thing one should do. Of course, he knew perfectly well that he couldn't turn his nose up. And if there was no other choice, he would turn even to the Holy Kingdom. Just then, his butler arrived and informed him that he urgently needed to look at it. The man began to read the contents of this letter with interest, and when he recognized the details lurking within it, he immediately smiled. A member of the audience inquired as to what was in it. The emperor says perhaps they won't have to go into debt to the Holy Kingdom. Errol reports that he already has a solution. Meanwhile, the situation in the Merman Empire was catastrophic. The dead were hanging around the city roads and attacking civilians. The knights of the fortresses didn't know what to do, and the people at the walls were begging to open the gates or they would die. The new ruler has been informed by scouts that a horde of undead has crossed the border and attacked the village. The victims knock at the castle's locked gates and ask for shelter. The current ruler of the Merman Empire is named Alan Amarath Janil. He realized that this was simply horrifying. After the war, the situation improved, albeit slightly. But the trust of the citizens of the empire remained unchanged, and it was difficult to cope with it. The mass invasion of the undead only aggravates their situation. The ruler said, they can count on the support of their allies, I guess. Well, he's been told it won't be easy. The kingdom of Demaniel is also in a difficult situation. Fortunately, the Holy Kingdom had offered to save them, so he thought they would have to accept their offer. Island sadly remarked that they had no other choice now, and there was nothing they could do. So, they should ask for help from the Holy Kingdom. He, in turn, wanted to be cross about it. They asked if bowing to the Light Realm Empress was all they could do now. Was there no other options at all? The Emperor realized, obviously, that they would interfere in the future in the affairs of their empire. But there was definitely no time to think about it now. The key reasons why the kingdom is considered to be taking the initiative of this situation is because of the holy water they distribute. Monsters flee only when they smell the odor, and uncleanness is cleansed with just one drop. Many countries have studied the holy water to learn its secret, but all has been in vain. The Holy Kingdom is actively offering support to countries that are plagued by the undead, using holy water as an excuse. But in return, they also demand more, forcing you to sign absurd treaties. This is their policy at the moment. The Demaniel Kingdom also didn't know what to do. They had heard rumors that the Meloman Empire had made an agreement with the Holy Kingdom. Despite the Sacred Kingdom's ridiculous terms, the Urnesia Empire was also a problem. After winning the war, the influence of this empire became so great that getting along with the Sacred Kingdom, with which Urnesia had a bad relationship, would be difficult. The king realized, even with all this, it was strange. Everyone was worried about the threat due to the undead. But it was unclear why the Empire of Urnesia had done nothing until now. It's like they don't need that help at all. While it's unlikely that all of this is possible, we need to figure out a way to deal with all the undead. Suddenly the butler informed His Highness that a letter had arrived from the Empire of Urnesia. The old man was interested and immediately familiarized himself with what was inside. They say they provide the means to destroy the undead at a lower price. Then, a little earlier in Fachilia, the head alchemist was interested, asking if Errol is talking about the creation of holy water. The prince noted the interlocutor, for he had tried secretly bringing holy water. It seems to be not just water, but some strange concentrated mana. That's the reason he hasn't analyzed it. And it seems that to a certain extent he can reproduce that composition, if that's what he thinks it is. The subordinate was delighted, talking about how in this case he would do what no one had ever managed to do before. Errol smiled and said, "You have to make a living at it somehow." One day the hero wondered if this was in his 45th life, or still in his 46th. Then he found himself in a world where a religious kingdom ruled the entire continent, and there was the only saint he had ever recognized. She was not someone who simply enjoyed universal support. She was sincerely dedicated to service and to chewing out world peace for others. One day she informed the hero that she didn't think the holy water she could make would be enough for everyone. Plus it was too expensive for the commoners. Saint wanted to find a way to mass-produce holy water for them. Or rather, even for the whole world, so asked the hero if he could help her with that. He bowed his own, informed them that he would do his best to make it happen. Then Errol cooperated with her because he was moved by her belief in a better world for people. To the point where she was willing to give up one of her main sources of income. Remembering those times, the hero realizes how naive he was then. But thanks to this now he had succeeded. The artificial water made by Errol was ready, and the head alchemist was delighted and realized it was true. But he could not believe that the boy had produced it in such a short time. Errol was proud of himself, and said that the effect was still a little different from the real that water. But there is one most enjoyable factor about artificial holy water, and it consists in the fact that it can be made in huge quantities, and the price for it is almost the same as for ordinary water. So it's not easy to set up continuous production to combat the current problem. All that remains is to come up with a production technology and send the goods to the front. Not much time passed after this conversation, and the water was already where it needed to be. On walled, fortified fortifications, the knights poured it down directly onto the walking dead. After these actions, Nezit indeed began to fall as expected of Mr. Errol. He sells holy water far cheaper than the Holy Kingdom, and he is their savior. The wolves were all happy to hear about Arella. Emperor Merman was angry that any country could take advantage of Urnesia without fear or reproach. But is fake holy water any good? While His Majesty the Emperor was angry with the butlers, he was approached. Speaking of which, another letter from Urnesia had arrived. Emperor Theorel reported, well aware that many countries may have doubts about this artificial holy water. So his son Erel is the developer of an artificial water tear, ready to give them a demonstration in person. All the countries that were attacked by the dead people got this. The Emperor encouraged everyone to participate, and it even came down to the Empress of the Holy Empire. After that, Errol himself was flooded with letters. The boy wondered how many letters had come, and more people were coming who wanted to see his face. And even the Holy Kingdom wants to see his face. Dia worriedly asked if everything was going to be okay. So far, the guy hadn't revealed his identity for security reasons. The prince remarked that it was fine. Thanks to his business anyway, it was no longer possible to hide that he was a genius. The enchantress did not think he had decided to speak for that reason. Errol noticed that she knew him well enough. Basically, he has as many as 3 reasons. For one thing, it would make them owe him. The hero wants to leave reminders in history that his invention saved many lives, to be able to use it in the future. The next reason is no less significant. It's that they will increase the need for it across the continent. Rumor has it that he's the weakest genius who doesn't care about anything in the world. Well, both times the word genius isn't bad, but he sure doesn't want to be indifferent. It is necessary to show them what terrible consequences await those who spoil relations with him. The girl understood that the gentleman was in his repertoire, and the final reason he cited was that they want to get even more golden. So it's suggested to snap up a bargain on this deal. After a little while, the day of the presentation came. Those present stared in disbelief as Arel arrived, thinking that this was the one from the Urnesia clan. Looking around, Pritz realized that there were a lot of people here. The kingdom of Dianiel, the kingdom of Felfan, and even the duchy of Kretchen. As they thought, the Merman Empire had abstained. So it was true that they had made a deal with the Holy Kingdom. The people present weren't even whispering about the fact that this guy was still a boy. The hero heard this perfectly well, but he didn't show it. He just smiled and said that he was flattered by everyone's attention. Then he greeted everyone and introduced himself. Everyone is probably wondering if artificial holy water really does have the same effect as real water. It's really a complete analog, except for the fact that you have to use a slightly larger amount. Believes that it is hard to believe based only on words on papers. So he decided to make a visual demonstration to them. The prince asked Sena to get everything ready, and she threw the cape off the cage. The cage contained a living corpse. The attendees were horrified when they saw the undead here at the presentation. Seeing the excitement, Arel asked, not to worry. This specimen is not dangerous as they had applied the appropriate magic, so asked the subordinates to continue. The girl immediately took the artificial holy water and poured it into the cage. The liquid instantly hit the victim, and she began to scream violently, after which the undead were destroyed. The hero remarked that that was the end of it, and asked if they wanted to watch it again. It was obvious that the rest of the people were frightened. Errol thought that this bunch of wimps were more accurate than that, probably. The man really thought he was just ruthless. As if it wasn't enough to bring the undead here, he didn't hesitate to personally destroy them without blinking an eye. He's definitely not the simple child you thought he was. Suddenly someone in the audience asked how much this holy water of his cost. Arel understood. Although artificial holy water is much cheaper, at least 12 tons are required per country. So he said that he understood that many people were having financial difficulties right now, so he would not force everyone to pay the bill at once. Well, he won't give it away for free either, as he spent a lot on it himself. He will accept payment in the future as soon as they can afford it. The people realized that it was a debt. Arel knows that plain water would cost no more than plain water. But under the present circumstances, the price tag could be raised. Suddenly, he was asked if he could ask a question. The hero reported that he was listening attentively. It was a girl who was asked if his artificial holy water had anything to do with the Holy Realm. The prince was a little surprised at this straightforwardness. He said that he understood perfectly well what was bothering them, but assured them that they were two completely different things. To clarify, he told me that the correct name for his artificial holy water is artificial mana neutralizer. The effect may be similar, but the principles and methods of production are quite different. Arel came up with it out of concern that the Holy Kingdom is unable to provide enough holy water. Any complaints about this commodity to him will deprive them of his support in the future. Let them know that. That concludes his presentation. He can only provide how much water they need, so let them decide for themselves. There was a lot of dead on the southeastern border of the Duchy of Critical. The knights defending the fortress were horrified that there was still no way these vile things would end. If this keeps up, at this rate they will break through and it will only be a matter of time. Suddenly, the subordinates turned to the commander. He reported that artificial holy water had arrived, sent from the Empire of Ernesia. The commander couldn't believe his eyes when he saw her. He was surprised because of its large quantity. He did not do it for a long time and said that he had to try it out soon, so ordered his subordinates to prepare to use it. They took watering cans and filled them with that very water, after which they began to water the dead from above. The artificial holy water was working perfectly, so the soldiers were ordered to head forward and fight without fear. The first team neutralizes the princess, while the second team uses artificial holy water to destroy her. This one was over this foul thing, and it was getting closer and closer, and she cheered. The commander thought her husband was finished, but everything suddenly changed. Even though Errol is a prince of a foreign country, he has a lot to be thankful for. Once the artificial holy water was delivered to all countries except the Merman Empire, people began exterminating the undead in various ways, and even magic was applied to them. But the magic was naturally applied using holy water. In doing so, the most unique of all ways to felch a bomb is to charge it with holy water. One of the knights asked if it wasn't a military weapon that was usually only used to defend the imperial palace. A co-worker remarked that they were allowed to use it to deal with a problem. Thus the arrows were filled with holy water. Before it started, Arel remarked that everyone should realize that these personally watering zombies is too risky, so you just have to shoot them with these water arrows. The knights had no choice but to try this method. The dead men only watched in amazement at what was happening, when the water attacked them and completely destroyed them. There was no limit to the joy of those who fired. At last, they were able to destroy this abominable, unexpected distance. The commander realized that he was very lucky thanks to Prince Errol, who provided them with all your water at a reduced price. He would not be able to use it only as much as needed, so he ordered the next charge to be prepared. Some time passed and the Dark Night came. After learning the information about the undead, the necromancer couldn't believe it. He was horrified that hundreds of thousands of his tendrils had been nearly destroyed in just a week, and only a quarter remained. If everything had gone according to plan, the cursed rulers of all countries would already be lying at his feet. That's why he curses Errol Ernesia. When the necromancer created the living dead, he worried about the holy water from the Holy Realm. There certainly wouldn't be enough of it to defeat his entire undead army. It's unclear where this guy got this artificial if you're water from. The necromancer must overthrow the wizard of the tower that oppresses them and usher in the era of the dark sect. He can't just sit here idly. Some time passed, and Aja reported to the Lord that scouts were reporting that all the undead remains were now concentrated in one place to protect their creator Black Mage. Punitive units created by secret agreement are expected to gradually approach the place of siege. Aurel wondered if he was hiding, using the undead as a shield. If that was the case, he would definitely not get out of there alive. Suddenly, the girl asked how to deal with the complaint that the Holy Kingdom had made to them. The prince said to ignore it. It's just a bunch of nonsense that's not even worth reading, and if they send another comment, let them ignore it. He then turned to Dia, asking what she thought of the enemy mage. Thought about it, the sorceress said. It would be nice to grab him as fast as possible, but thinks it won't be easy, because he has hundreds of 1,000 undead under his control. She's not good at necromancy. She, according to reputable sources, the maximum recorded number of undead a 7th level mage could control was 30,000. Errol noted that she was telling the truth. Dia doesn't know what methods he uses, but it's very likely that he has great power. But even his powers must have a limit, and that's when they'll get him. The protagonist thought that perhaps the fight would not be easy. Then should he sit on the sidelines? The furious battle with the dead was still going on. Suddenly one of the knights shouted that dark, and the maw showed. Therefore everyone needed to focus on the new goal. Wizards, everyone else immediately began to do so. But even their deadly attacks failed. The necromancer used a strong shield, with which he reflected everything. Then he asked if they thought they could defeat him with such pathetic spells. After his own pathos words, he used his power already. The knight said to use defense magic sooner rather than later, and the rest of the group tried to attack.